Initially, final girls were usually written as pure and virginal women who avoid sex and survive, but as the slasher genres evolved throughout the years, we have seen variations of the archetype. We've had numerous great examples, from classics like Laurie Strode in Halloween to modern takes like Tree Gelbman from Happy Death Day, but there are cases when the slasher film may have been good, but its heroine was not. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 great horror movies with annoying final girls. Number 10, Eleanor in Truth or Die. Truth or Die is a 2012 British horror film about a group of teenagers invited to a secluded cabin. Savvy fans of the slasher subgenre immediately know nothing good is about to happen, and wouldn't you know it, the trip takes a turn for the worse. You see, Justin invited the group to find out who was responsible for a prank gone wrong that resulted in the death of his brother, Felix. As the story unfolds, we find out it was Eleanor who was to blame, and in doing so, indirectly caused the events of the movie. Eleanor coerced Felix into performing oral sex on her passed-out boyfriend and blackmailed him with the footage. This led to the young man committing suicide, though he's later revealed to have survived this attempt. Now, any rational human being would understand why Justin did what he did, but what makes this worse is that Eleanor wins by the end of Truth or Die. Eleanor never faces real consequences for her actions, which have cost the lives of her friends, and she even kills both Justin and Felix. Because of this, many horror fans find Eleanor annoying and one of the most undeserving final girls out there. Number 9, Alice Johnson in A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master. A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master continues where its predecessor, Dream Warriors, left off. But one thing it drops the ball on compared to previous Elm Street films is with its protagonist. Alice Johnson, played by Lisa Wilcox, is a quiet young girl who daydreams all the time. She then becomes the titular Dream Master when Kristen Parker passes her powers to her and turns Alice into Freddy Krueger's most formidable foe. As the movie progresses, Alice becomes more powerful as she gains new abilities from her fallen friends. By the end of the picture, she has received Kristen's ability to drag people into dreams, Sheila's intelligence, Rick's martial arts, and more. The Dream Master then defeats Freddy for good. Well, until he inevitably returns in the next movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5: The Dream Child. The problem with Alice is that she is essentially a blank at the start of the movie and only gains traits once her friends start getting picked off. Everything notable about her, including the mental strength she gains, comes from her friends, and this makes her somewhat of a leech. Thankfully, The Dream Child would improve the characterization of Alice. Number 8, Allison Nelson in Halloween Ends. Allison Nelson is one of the main protagonists in David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy. As the granddaughter of Laurie Strode, the character is the descendant of horror royalty, and this had much to prove to fans of the genre. Thankfully, Allison is charming and likeable thanks to the writing and to Andy Matichak's performance. But with every subsequent entry in this trilogy, the characterization of Allison becomes worse, and by Halloween Ends, she becomes flat out annoying. In Halloween Ends, Allison spends the majority of the film disagreeing with her grandmother to the point where she blames her for the events of the previous films. Allison also ignores Laurie's warnings and starts an ill-fated romance with Corey in a relationship that takes up a huge chunk of the movie's runtime. Because an edgy love story is what Halloween fans want to see in the grand finale, right? Ultimately, Laurie is proven right when Corey becomes unhinged by the middle of Halloween Ends and starts his own killing spree. But worse than killing the residents of Haddonfield, the writers of Halloween Ends managed to assassinate a character, Allison, who was initially worth rooting for. Number 7, Rocky in Don't Breathe. One of the biggest talking points of Don't Breathe is the question of who the audience was supposed to root for. Our initial trio of characters, Rocky, Alex and Money, are burglars who attempt to rob blind war veteran Norman Nordstrom of the money he was awarded after the death of his daughter. Referred to as simply the blind man in the film's credits, Norman turns out to be more dangerous than thought, leaving moviegoers to question whether his actions in the movie were justified or not. Of the group of burglars, Rocky is the only one who survives the events of Don't Breathe, though she is responsible for some questionable actions. Firstly, Rocky is complicit in the robbery, and while she has a sympathetic backstory, stealing from a blind man is still pretty low. When things eventually go wrong, she also turns down Alex's offer to call the police because this would mean losing the money they stole. Finally, Don't Breathe gives a definitive answer of who to root for, when the blind man is revealed to have held a woman named Cindy, who caused the death of Norman's daughter, captive and has sexually assaulted and impregnated her. In an act of kindness, Rocky tries to rescue the woman, but her actions cause Cindy to be killed anyway. Number 6. Alice Hardy in Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th may be a horror classic, but one controversial opinion about the movie is that the final girl, Alice Hardy, isn't very good. Though the character has developed a fan base, she may be one of the most overrated final girls in the slasher subgenre. A big reason for this is that the character never really makes an impact throughout the first Friday the 13th film. Though we do get a subversion of the final girl trope with her implied affair with Steve Christie, Alice doesn't do much for most of the running time, while characters like Jack and Marcy end up standing out more. Our poor final girl, on the other hand, has thrilling scenes like an extended sequence of making coffee. Alice really just comes around by the time she's the last one standing and Mrs. Voorhees is revealed to be the killer. But even then, our heroine frustratingly fumbles her defense and drops her weapons twice rather than finishing off the murderer. Alice does finally get lucky though, as she picks up a machete and chops Pamela Voorhees' head off. Thankfully, the series would get better final girls with the Friday the 13th sequels. Number 5. Sally in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sally Hardesty and her friends encountered the Sawyer family in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where most of the group were killed in brutal ways. Our heroine, however, would manage to make it through the terrible ordeal and become the film's final girl, even returning in last year's straight-to-Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because the 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released before slasher movies would truly become popular, Sally is written differently compared to future final girls of the subgenre. For starters, we never really know a lot about her, and she serves more of an audience avatar, especially towards the horrors that occur later during the film's climax. This can be off-putting for those used to seeing final girls as strong survivors. And while most examples of the final girl fight and outsmart their villains, Sally is more of a reactionary character who endures the abuse she receives from the Sawyer family. She spends the rest of the film screaming her head off and losing her mind in the process. Of course, this isn't the fault of actress Marilyn Burns, who did a fine job portraying Sally, but many slasher fans might be annoyed with how Sally is written overall. Number 4. DEENA in Fear Street Part 1, 1994. The Fear Street trilogy is the Netflix adaptation of the popular R.L. Stine horror books. All 3 films are entertaining and a great homage to horror movies of the past. But for the first picture, Fear Street Part 1, 1994, a big point of criticism is its divisive protagonist DEENA. The character displays toxic behaviour towards her ex Sam, from guilt-tripping her to forcing her to come out as a lesbian. And while DEENA's mood stems from being understandably heartbroken from a breakup, it doesn't excuse her for causing a car crash that injures the woman she supposedly loves. When the threat of the film comes for Sam, DEENA is extremely motivated to protect her, even at the expense of her younger brother and her 2 friends. In fact, by the end of Fear Street Part 1, DEENA's friends have been killed, yet DEENA never mourns them. Instead, everything seems alright with her as long as she has Sam alive and well. Thankfully, DEENA is not the protagonist for Part 2, and she's also much better written and likeable as a character by the time of Part 3. Number 3. Julie in I Know What You Did Last Summer. When it comes to the Scream-inspired slashers of the second half of the 90s, I Know What You Did Last Summer remains the most recognisable out there. Starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Philippe and Freddie Prinze Jr., the movie was a hit and even spawned 2 sequels. But unlike the Scream movies, Last Summer did not have a great final girl. Here, Julie James serves as the main heroine but is considered by slasher aficionados as annoying throughout the first film. This is largely due to Julie acting all high and mighty, despite being complicit in dumping the body of a man she and her friends accidentally killed. Jennifer Love Hewitt does her best with the role, but the limited writing makes her character hard to root for. And by the film's third act, Julie is unfortunately turned into a damsel in distress who does nothing but scream, while Prinze Jr.'s Ray is the one who saves the day. Ultimately, many fans of I Know What You Did Last Summer would have preferred Sarah Michelle Gellar's Helen Shivers to have survived instead of Julie. Number 2. Kate in Army of the Dead. Zack Snyder returned to the zombie genre with 2021's Army of the Dead. Though most of the film is a fun and entertaining romp, many fans agree that if there was one sore spot in the movie, it would be Kate Ward. The character is the daughter of protagonist Scott Ward, but while our hero is devoted to his daughter, audiences did not share the same sentiment. In an attempt to rescue her friend Geeta, Kate tells her dad that she'll be accompanying the team. If he says otherwise, she'll sneak in anyway. Kate, of course, eventually abandons the group despite the threat of a nuclear launch on Las Vegas. This forces Scott and his ally Peters to go look for the young woman, which gets them killed by the end of Army of the Dead. What makes it worse is that Geeta, the person Kate was trying to rescue this entire time, dies during a helicopter crash, making Kate's quest entirely pointless. In a sea of heroes, villains, rogues, and colourful characters, Army of the Dead makes the worst mistake by making the most annoying character its final girl. Number 1. Noriko in Battle Royale. Battle Royale is a highly influential Japanese film and the precursor to the Hunger Games. The movie is filled with a colourful cast of characters, all of whom have well-written backstories and motivations. One of the principal figures is Noriko Nakagawa, who serves as our final girl. But in a film filled with memorable heroes and villains, our heroine, along with the male lead Shuya, often feel plain compared to their more interesting classmates. It doesn't help that our final girl isn't given enough screen time for her backstory, and as a result, she often feels underdeveloped. Sure, Noriko has the traditional qualities of a final girl, like being innocent and pure, but while other examples of the trope are strong female leads, Noriko is more of a damsel rather than an active character. The males, including the villainous Kitano, all exist to protect her, and because of this, a lot of fans feel like Noriko does not deserve to survive the events of Battle Royale. Even by the time she finally grows a spine and kills Kitano, many would claim Noriko's development was a little too late. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed something, then please do let us know in the comments down below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.